Hey guys! So this video is going to be all about investing for beginners, so sit tight and stay tuned. I'm going to break this video up into multiple parts so that way it's easier to digest, and if you need to go back to understand a certain part, then you can do that really easily. Hopefully you won't need to though, but if you don't understand it, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have by the end in the comment section down below. Or if you really know me personally, then obviously. So let's get started. What's really important is taking stock of where you are right now. So let's put this into context, because obviously we're in a global crisis right now. I'm not going to sit here and ask all 36 million people that have filed for unemployment in the past few months to get themselves together and pull themselves up by the bootstraps to be able to invest in their financial future. That makes no sense. If you're sitting here saying, Jack, I don't have the money to invest, that's okay. If you clicked on this video, you probably want to get your financial health in order, at least starting now. And that's a good first step. Being able to recognize where you're at right now, what you have the potential to do right now, and what you can do to set yourself up for success later is really important. So if you're not budgeting already, it's a good way to get started. Make a rudimentary income sheet, put your income at the top, put your expenses, going from most important to least important, going downward, so you can see how much income you have after all of your expenses, month by month. So that way, you can really see, after your mandatory expenses, how much do you really have left over. And if there's not a lot there, that's okay. That's not a topic that we're going to be tackling in this video, but that gives you a better picture of your finances than most people care to look at. And you've already done a lot to improve your financial health just by doing that. I'm going to be honest, it makes no sense to put $1,000 in the market if you can't make rent and you can't put food on the table. Once you've actually made your rudimentary budget, or using your budget already because you're on top of it, make sure that you actually have enough savings to protect yourself in the case of an emergency, i.e., an emergency fund. Yes, yes. If you know me, you know that I am very big about saving. I love saving, I love investing, but what's important is getting yourself an emergency fund so that you can weather the storm in case anything happens. Right now, I've said it before and I'll say it again, 40% of Americans can't afford a $1,000 emergency without dipping into their retirement savings or getting into debt. Don't let this be you. If it is you, that's okay. But what you need to prioritize first is building up your emergency fund. And so what I recommend is being able to meet that threshold of $1,000. And once you can do that, then I would say it's really safe for you to invest. Not to mention, you can do two things at once. You can put aside the extra money that you have into investing and saving for your emergency fund. But until you reach that $1,000 threshold, I highly recommend prioritizing that over putting money into the market. You don't have to cross that threshold to start investing, but again, look at the world we're in. Are you a risk-taking person, or are you a risk-averse person? This is your risk tolerance, and it's really important to understand this. And that's because it affects what kind of investments you might make and what your total portfolio will look like. So if you have a really long time horizon, then you might be able to take on more risk. So let's look at an example first of assessing yourself to get a better understanding of what I mean by that. So let's take Luke, a 22-year-old college student who's saving for retirement. He's got $1,000 in retirement savings, and so he doesn't really need this money for a long time. But let's say he can be certain that he won't need this money in 10 years. If it disappeared, he wouldn't be, well, he'd be worse off for it, but he wouldn't be struggling to make ends meet without it. So just in that short amount of time, you're able to get a better sense of what his plan might look like. So Luke's really young, he's only 22, and he's saving for a long-term goal that's about 40 years away. retirement. So that means he can take on a lot more risk than if he were already 70 and using the money that he saved in retirement. He would want that money to be a lot more stable. Another good question to ask yourself is, do you have a job with a decent retirement plan? If you don't know, you should find out, because that's a good way to be able to make a lot more money without really doing much. A lot of jobs have programs in place where, when you contribute to your retirement account, they match your contributions up to a certain percentage of your salary. So, just for easy math, let's say you were making $100,000 a year and you were getting a 7% match on your 401k contributions. That 401k is your retirement account. That would mean that up until $7,000 is contributed into your account, your company, your job, will match every single penny that you put into your retirement account. And so some companies do this a little bit differently and the process can vary, but generally speaking, that's how it's going to work if you have a contribution match offered by your company. And that is free money. So please make sure, if nothing else, if you are employed, if you have the opportunity to look into this, look into it now, because you could be missing out on free money if you don't look into that and you have that. If you do end up having an employer-sponsored 401k account where you can get contribution matching, I would put your money towards that first. And if not, if you're unemployed or you don't have contribution matching at your job, then you can look into an IRA, and that stands for Individual Retirement Account. And so what's really cool about these is that they're associated with you. They're your individual retirement account, and they're pretty much as individual as your checking account and savings account. They're with you wherever you go, regardless of whatever job you have. You can currently contribute up to the lesser of $6,000 a year, or your total earned income for the year that you'd be contributing for. I won't go into too much detail here, but I will link in the description videos by this channel called 2 Cents, which makes really great financial information videos as well, and they explain the concept of 401ks and Roth IRAs a little bit better. To give you a brief overview of IRAs and 401ks, a traditional IRA and a traditional 401k, i.e. those names without anything attached, are just accounts, the same as your checking and savings account. It's really just a place to hold your investments. And when you contribute to those traditional accounts, every dollar that you contribute to those accounts is deducted or deductible from your taxable income for that corresponding year. And you pay taxes on the amount that you withdraw in the years that you pull from it, presumably in retirement. The opposite is true for Roth 401ks and Roth IRAs. And so you pay taxes on the money going in, and then you don't have to pay any taxes on the money coming out. And so I highly recommend, if you are younger, you're probably not going to be making as much money now as you will be in the future. And so a Roth IRA is a really great way to get started saving for retirement, because you pay low taxes now, and later on when you are balling out and you're in a very high tax bracket, then you save on taxes because you don't have to pay any in the future. This is all legal, by the way. You have a lot of choices. Anyway, let's go back to the second part of the video where I told you to be a little bit more introspective and you started having many existential crises about your long-term plans and what the point of investing even is for you if it's so far out. Anyway, imagine if you were one of those people that needed your money in the short term and you invested it. That would be really bad. Now, the scenario. You saved up for a down payment. You saved up $300,000 for your dream house. And I'm realizing if that's just the down payment, that's a pretty expensive house. You dream big. The day that you go to close for the mortgage, all of a sudden, your $300,000 down payment has dropped $150,000 because, I don't know, a global pandemic is sweeping the nation. It's easier to make these kinds of examples now, obviously, but for the past 10 years, people really didn't believe this, and there was a lot of people that argued that you should invest your short-term savings, believe it or not. But yeah, it's not the best idea to invest something when you are putting a lot of value on the fact that it'll keep its value in the short term, and it'll have that value exactly when you need it. For these kinds of funds, I highly recommend a CD, certificate of deposit, or high-yield savings account, or even money market fund, all things that pay decent interest rates in this low-rate environment, to fight inflation a little bit, but also keep the value of your cash stable. For longer term horizons, you can generally accept more risk. Now, there is some academic debate about how much risk it actually takes away when you are investing for the long term. But for our purposes, let's just say that that's the case. So if your goal is retirement, which is very important, you have a retirement crisis on the horizon, half of people 65 and older only have about $60,000 in savings, please save for retirement. The world's going to collapse if you don't. You can invest in stocks. And if you've already maxed out your possible contributions to your retirement accounts, or if you're just doing this for a little bit of fun, you can use taxable brokerages like Robinhood, Acorn, Schwab, Betterment. I'm sure you've seen those ads or even in YouTube videos. Now, the advice that I'm going to give you here about your investing plan is going to be pretty wide, and that's because each person's going to have a different plan based on the factors we talked about in the previous two parts. But here's something that's pretty universal. You need to diversify. This is not a political statement. Diversity is good. By diversifying your investments, you get the one free lunch that exists out there in this world. Higher returns and lower risk at the same time. You don't have to just hold one stock. You can hold all of them. You have the power to do this by investing in these securities called index funds. A lot of my friends will come up to me and ask, hey, should I invest in this or should I invest in XYZ company? And the real answer is, if you don't know how that company works, and if I don't know how that company works, I can't tell you how to invest regarding that specific area. But I can give you a lot of historical research done on the markets and benchmarks like the S&P 500, which is what we often use to talk about US markets, and use that historical information to make a bet about the future and say, hey, I bet the US economy is going to do pretty well, considering it's done pretty well in the past 100 years or so. And so that's what index fund investing is, focusing on a specific market, specific sector. It follows a specific benchmark of different types of companies based on different similarities, geographically, size, industry, or otherwise, and you're able to invest in all those companies equally by investing in an index fund that follows that benchmark. I'm not saying you should never invest in specific companies, but that takes a lot of time, a lot of focus, a lot of energy that you just might not be willing to do for every single company that you invest in. And if you don't believe me, that's fine. I said I was a random eye on the internet, and my status still hasn't changed. You might believe Warren Buffett, who also advocates investing in index funds, and has actually gone on record to state that he wants 90% of his estate to be invested in index funds when he's gone. He could have given me that money, but it's fine. Index funds are a type of passive investing, which means that they're easy, simple, and help protect you from the psychology of fear when you look at your investments. With passive investing, you can take a hands-off approach, and you don't have to fall into the trap of accidentally buying high and selling low when everybody knows you should always buy low, sell high. Index funds are also beautifully low cost because of their passive investing nature, because all they do is mimic an index that already exists. You can also go for target date funds, which are another type of fund, mutual funds, that are still passive investing but are a little bit more expensive. The reason for this is because they project a certain year, a target date, for your retirement. So let's go back to that college investor from earlier on in the video. They would probably be retiring around 2060, 2065, and so they'd look for a target date fund that targets that specific year. They would invest their money into the target date fund, and the target date fund would do the work for them of creating a mini portfolio. So within a target date fund, that's target date fund 2060, for example, it might be 80% stocks, 20% bonds, because it takes into account what we said earlier and suggests that that's probably the best course to take. And then it usually creates a glide path going on into the future. So a target date fund that's for 2020 might be 90% bonds, 10% stocks instead, so that the retiree is able to get a more stable income towards the future, but also still access a little bit of growth from those 10% stocks. And so That's why they tend to be more expensive. They're doing the work of changing the percentage of your portfolio for you so that you really don't have to worry about anything. But if you do want to take on the mantle of the hard work, i.e., updating your portfolio every couple of years, checking in every once in a while to make sure that you're actually contributing as you should and that your portfolio matches your current risk tolerance, then you can mimic a target date fund yourself using those index funds before. Because target date funds tend to use those very index funds themselves. So you could build a target date fund using index funds of stocks and bonds to match your personal preference and risk tolerance. So you can end up paying a little bit less and have a little bit more input in the process, if that's what you so desire. A good rule of thumb that people tend to use is subtracting their age from 100 or 110 or even 120, so that way they can see how much they should have invested in each thing. So the number, the difference that you get from subtracting your age from whichever number you chose, is the percentage of your portfolio that should be invested in stocks, and the rest would be invested in bonds. Again, the choice is up to you, so you can see that you have a lot of freedom here. Finally, don't ever, ever, ever time the market. Don't do it. You're going to lose so much more money waiting around to time the market, and you're not going to do it right. If you could, you would already be a millionaire, if not a billionaire, if not a trillionaire. Not to mention, if you really could time the markets perfectly, you would be Wall Street's most wanted. Believe me, you cannot time the markets. So, what should you do? Dollar cost averaging is when you have a set amount of money that you invest over a specific period of time. Lump sum investing is when you have that same set of money, but you just invested into the markets all at once. Vanguard actually did some research and found that historically, lump sum investing gives greater historical returns over dollar cost averaging. But if you choose to dollar cost average, then you should probably limit the time that you're going to invest that set of money to around a year or less. So that way you don't gain a lot of opportunity cost from the cash just sitting on the sidelines gaining no interest. Investing consistently from your salary is not dollar cost averaging, but it's still a great habit that you should employ if you have the ability to do so. I hope that this video was helpful, and please give me any feedback that you have in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Bye.